Welcome to the Board Game Brothers podcast. Normally a podcast in Dutch, but this time a special episode around role-player adventures. As a big fan of role-player adventures, we have an interview with Keith Matika from Thunderworks Games. He just started a new Kickstarter, a new expansion, Gulpax Secret for role-player adventures, and it's already funded. Let's hear from Keith for what new mechanisms this expansion will introduce in the role-player universe.
Yeah, hey, I'm Keith Mateka from Thunderworks Games. Out of Madison, Wisconsin in the US. I started this crazy small board game publisher in 2013. Most well known for games like Role Player, Cartographers, and a variety of other games. I'm married and I have a son who's 11 years old and very passionate about games and everything around that.
Okay, cool. And we're talking because you have a Kickstarter coming up.
Yeah. So November 1st, we're launching Gulpax's Secret as the second expansion for Role Player Adventures. Role Player Adventures is a narrative adventuring game in which you work together cooperatively with 1 to 4 players, and you are going on these great quests. So the original game is 12 adventure books. Each adventure has its own map and has its own kind of adventure book. A lot of it is kind of choose your own adventure style where lots of choices being made. One of the hallmarks of the series is the game is remembering your choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's multiple layers that the game does that. You write down keywords to remember things within an adventure. We are recording, or you're gaining title cards that help record what you've done from adventure to adventure. And they also kind of serve as a, previously on Role Player Adventures, like if you haven't played in a couple of weeks and you don't remember all the choices you made, the important ones we document for you. And then there's 3 different factions that you're kind of bumping up and down in favor with as you make choices and as you play. And depending on who likes you and who doesn't like you, choices and situations are going to change dramatically. So each adventure takes about 2 hours to play. The very first one in the base game is more of a tutorial mission, and that's a little on the short side. But some of the other ones can stretch, close to 2, maybe a little bit longer than that. It's mechanically, you're going to be doing dice events, which are skill checks and combat. As any good fantasy adventure has to have some kind of fighting in it. So you get to do that, and that mechanic is you get a kind of a set of dice values and dice colors that you're trying to meet, and then the group decides whether they want to kind of for sure get certain dice into the combat or kind of do some combination of random dice. You get to control like how much randomness you have in that initial dice roll, and then you roll the dice, and everybody around the table is playing cards because everyone has a unique deck of cards. Because every card in Role Player Adventures, which has I don't know what off the top of my head, I don't know what the actual number is, but it feels like 1,000 cards, but it's probably closer to 500 or something. But every card is unique.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and every card is unique. So everybody has their own unique deck of cards, and they're playing cards to do things. To manipulate the dice or do other things, but they're very familiar for people who've played Role Player before, which are things like flipping dice to the opposite side or increasing or decreasing their values or changing their colors or whatever. So everybody plays cards to try to meet these goals that are in front of you that are represented by the monsters or the skill check. And you either succeed or you don't, and the story is going to take dramatically different directions as a result. Yeah, and so one of the cool things about Role Player Adventures is that, and I don't know of any other board game that does this, where there's a separate game called Role Player, which is a character creation game, and you're playing that as a competitive game. And at the end of that game, the number of times I have been told that like people love the game, but they want to do something with their character. Like Role Player Adventures is the big answer to that. So like you can import your character from one game into this other game and go on adventures with them, or you can use one of the 36 pre-generated characters, which those are very cool too. So those are kind of the big bullet points on Role Player Adventures. And the new expansion, Gulpax's Secret, is a 7 adventure campaign. So the first expansion was a backstory kind of uh, additive piece to the main campaign. This one is its own separate campaign. It's 7 adventures long. It takes place during the time of the cartographers. So if you're familiar with the board game cartographers that we put out at Thunderworks, that is in the same world, but it's much earlier in the history of what happens in the original Role Player Adventures game.
Yeah.
So this new one is kind of in that time period. So, if you're familiar with cartographers and you see the old gnome on the cover or the female knight on the hero's cover, like you get to meet these characters and you're going to go adventuring with them. And there's like, it's been really fun to kind of make all these connections between the cartographers games and this kind of new campaign. And there's, this is something that I've started to do over all these kind of games that are in the world of role player. But like this one, it's like tenfold. Like there's so many kind of Easter eggs for people to find and have fun with in this new one because there's all this cartographers content and we build this kind of more cohesive world because we have things that are consistent across multiple games and stuff like that. So the new campaign, 7 adventures long, you start out in Wildwood, and they're having there's a contest going on. People are trying to join the Guild of Heroes, and you show up, and then a werewolf comes out of nowhere and attacks the Immortal Knight, who's like kind of a guardian of the people.
Okay, so there's also, again, the Mortal Knight is also playing a role in it.
Right. So the Immortal Knight is this idea which is the main character on the front of Role Player, but the idea is that this is a responsibility that goes from person to person throughout time.
Yeah.
And so now we have a female character who's the Immortal Knight, and she has just been attacked by this werewolf, and she says, "All right, everybody, go chase the werewolf, and then you can be in the Heroes Guild." So you're on a werewolf hunt in the first adventure. It's a fun time. But part of that first piece of playing the first adventure is that you run into one of the new mechanics of the game, which is professions, right? So, you have you might be a dwarven, warrior that has all the stuff, and that's cool, and your special class ability, just like in the basic game. But now you have an additional layer in which you have a profession. So there's 8 different professions to choose from, and
that's quite a bit, I can imagine. That you have to come up with all those how do you say that, the content for all the professions.
Right. There's lots of entries in the books that say, like, if you're the blacksmith profession, then this is going to happen, or if you have this profession, this is going to happen. And we have to layer all 8 of them into every single book. It has to make sense with the narrative of the things that are going on. So building all this stuff has been like taking some time for sure. But there's 8 of them. Let's see if I can remember them off the top of my head. So there's a miner, there's a jeweler, there's a bodyguard, there's a blacksmith, there's an herbalist, and I'm losing it. And there's a few other ones.
Something with leatherworking or something.
What's that?
With leatherworking, or
no?
Is that the armor or something?
That's probably there's the blacksmith is kind of like, and there's I don't know if I mentioned that there's a jeweler and some other things, but the idea is the thing that's fun about it is you get your own special intro just for your profession, and then you get a special ability, and this is like a new ability that you can use freely. They all do something really interesting outside of the box of the normal things you can do, and so you have this kind of you have more of an identity as an individual instead of like as a group. Yeah. And then you get all these kind of things that pop out in terms of narrative additions based on your particular quest related to your profession. And I don't want to tell you too much about it, but it does get very cool, and some of those abilities can evolve over time. So.
Oh, cool! Yeah, because when I read the stuff about the professions, I was immediately thinking about a computer game, World of Warcraft. That sure. has that in it. So that was one of the things I found really cool back in the time. So yeah. When I saw this one, I think, yeah, that's how can you make it with just with a book or with cards. So I'm really interested about that part of the expansion.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the centerpiece of the new things for the adventure. I mean, the story is great. We get to tell it in a kind of a new environment, but there's some familiar elements. The professions is kind of one of the big kind of mechanical pieces that really, because when you play these games and it says, is there a minor player? And that's you, and you're like, yes, that's me. And then you get to read the special thing. It feels really good.
Because I can imagine. When we were talking before this, I played it once solo, and then you're the group on your own, and now I'm playing with the two of us, and then I can imagine that because I haven't played the first expansion yet.
Oh.
But I'm going to how do you say it? Kickstarter it for sure, because I think that's really cool.
That's one of the tough things about the original Kickstarter for this project is that we received so many orders between the time we decided how many we were going to print to we got them, that like it was really hard for people outside of the U.S. to get the first expansion. Actually, a lot of people had a hard time getting the original game as well. So we're trying to fix that with the new Kickstarter, where you can get the base game, or because we're going to reprint the base game and Nephros, the first expansion, and also the new one. And then we also have, like, we haven't talked about this a whole lot, but we also have been partnering with a group of developers in Australia, which I mentioned earlier, who they've been working over the last year to work on a graphic novel that's
cool.
The World of Ulos, which is the role player universe. And that's going to be an add-on for the campaign as well. So so there's this graphic novel that has 4 different comics in it. Each one tells kind of the backstory of some of the characters from the Role Player Adventures game. So for example, the end of the first adventure in Role Player Adventures has Tog, this big ogre that's like trying to smash this chest open, and you get to make this decision whether, like, do you do what the king wants you to do and kind of take out the guy, or do you like have a little bit of sympathy and try to understand him, and kind of let him escape, because you have some sympathy for this person thing, however you perceive it, So one of the comics is all about, like, how did Tog get to that point in time, like what drove him to be there, and he talks about, like, all his brethren have been failed at this war. The war has just been over, and like they've basically lost, and he's really frustrated about that. And you can get to find out the details of how that happened through the comic book. So it's been a really fun project, but I haven't been talking about it a whole lot because I wanted to be a little bit of a surprise. But we're gonna have this graphic novel available during the Kickstarter as well, so that's cool.
So once this episode is releasing somewhere during the Kickstarter, maybe it's already on the Kickstarter page. So otherwise, people will know it by this.
Cool.
And what I was thinking, because you're mentioning Role Player, that was I think the first big game for Thunderwork Games, or
So
the breakthrough, so to say.
Yeah, so I call, when I'm doing things at conventions or whatever, I always think, like, this is the house that Role Player built. It's like about the success of Role Player. A lot of these other things that I've been able to do over the last, it's going to be our 10-year anniversary next year, and Role Player came out in 2016, so it's not a new game for sure, but it continues to do well, and people still love to play it, and people are still discovering it all the time, so that's great. But Role Player was a huge success for me, and I did have that moment when I was working on it. When I was, I remember, like, telling my wife, I'm like, "This is $1 million idea. This is really good." Like, I was really confident that it was an idea that people were going to get excited about, and it turned out I was right. I mean, I have said that before, where I said, "Hey, honey, this is $1 million idea," and it wasn't. But that was
you only have to have $1 million idea. So
I know. I need $1 billion idea
now. But what I was wondering, did you have, when you were designing Role Player, did you already have something in mind, like role playing adventures, that you can build characters, so in the end you can play a game, a different game with them? Or
I mean,
is it was evolving?
it evolved over time, right? So as we were developing role player, like, I used to get that comment from people all the time, like, I want to do something with this character, and I'm like, but I really stuck to my guns. Like I was like, I want this game that's but just about making characters, and like that's so weird and different, and nobody's done that before. And I had this analogy in my head, and I've said this a few times, where like to me, um, I'm a big gamer, so to me, like playing like Dominion, where you're building your deck, is to like Magic the Gathering, where you're like playing the deck that you built. To me, it was like role player is where you're doing it's the game about preparing to do the role playing piece, whether it be Pathfinder or whatever. And so I was in love with that idea, and I heard all these comments and I just ignored them. I was like, you know what, that's cool. I know you want to do something with your character, but if you want to role play, then go play Dungeons and Dragons. Or if you want to go through a dungeon, go play Descent or Mice and Mystics or whatever. This is not trying to be those games. But you know, obviously that comment kept coming. So then we wanted to do Monsters and Minions, which was the first expansion for role player, which was to me like a half answer. Like it's still a character building game, but you get to do some stuff. So that kind of hopefully kind of held some people over. But the idea of doing some kind of more kind of epic fantasy adventuring was always something I wanted to do. But like I didn't want to do a traditional role playing game because I don't know. I'm not a role playing game writer. I mean, I've played a lot of role playing games, but I don't really consider myself. That's not really something I want to do a whole lot of. But then I saw like Red Raven Games was doing Above and Below and Near and Far, and these narrative games started popping out, and I started playing like Sherlock Holmes, the Consulting Detective, and all these narrative games were getting more popular again. I was like, I think this is the way I would do it, and I said to myself, that's a huge project. I don't think I can do that. And then one of my friends, who's a writer, approached me separately saying he wanted to work on a project together. And I said, well, we could do it, but
it's big.
I need you to know this is going to take a long time. We're going to be working on this for like 3 years or something. And he's like, I'm in. Let's do it. So, after a long time, a lot of hard work, we were able to kind of bring it to life and bring it to Kickstarter, and we got it out into people's hands. And now it's done well enough to do some more content. So we've learned a lot about making these games. So we're faster at them, and I think we do a better job. So that's kind of where that goes. And on the other hand, like role player, I feel like it's kind of gotten as big as I want it to get. There's a lot of content for that game with 2 expansions and a bunch of like promo items and stuff. I don't want to keep working. I feel like there's enough stuff there for people. But so now I'm focusing on the adventure side, which is the storytelling piece, which I've been.
So role player is finished for you, so to say. So it's complete.
Yeah. I mean, I could change my mind someday, but right now that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's then if you can switch, you're building a world, so to say, with Ulos. And if you can switch, if you can switch between games, because they all have different mechanics.
Right.
That's I think then it inspires you. It can it makes you creative. I think.
Yeah.
Because if you have a new ID, I think which game fits it better is if it's a role play adventure or cartographers or something like that. So,
right.
Yeah.
So people pitch games to me all the time, and sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, like to me it has to be a great game first, and then I decide, well, does this go in the role player universe or not? So like there's things that we released, in the last year, like 10 Penny Parks and Cape May, and we've got a cyberpunk game coming up called Metro Runner. And those are like games that, I could have shoehorned them into the role player universe or whatever, but I think they're fine in with their own themes. And I don't think every game that comes from Thunderworks has to be a role player game, but there definitely are some coming. So,
And what I also was wondering that because when you released role player, there was a huge book about making your own adventures.
Right.
have people contacted you with some ideas with
Yeah,
their which
yeah.
they can
So
put in your which is where and those ideas are put in this expansion, or how is that work?
so yeah. So when Role Player Adventures came out, we released this book, which is like how to write an adventure.
Yeah, 80 pages
I
long,
had this.
so something like that.
It's it's a few pages. Yeah.
Yeah, a few. Yeah, yeah. It's a book on. It's an adventure book on its own.
Yeah. And it was fun putting it together, and it was just kind of a project that James and I and Peter and John, the team, worked on together after the Kickstarter was finished. Um, and it actually helped us a little bit to kind of formalize our process. Like
Mhm.
we kind of figured out how to do this, stumbling in the dark, and we learned things, but we didn't like document them or anything. And kind of building that book and that document was kind of helpful for that. There have been some people who've written adventures. There's one that's available on BGG on BoardGameGeek.com, which is kind of a variant of the first adventure. And then I know of at least one other person um, who actually is local to me that he's writing a trilogy of adventures, so 3 adventures,
Okay.
and he's finished the first one and he's playtesting it, and he let us see it and we gave him some feedback. Um, but I think I'd like to see more people do that kind of work. But I mean, it's not a small job, right? It's not you don't just slap it together. It takes
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
thought and a lot of creativity. But people are doing it.
Okay.
But I hope people do it more. And I do have this dream of someday that to like put out adventures that were created by the fans, and I think that's cool. That hasn't happened yet, but we're going to keep making stuff, and then hopefully some other people might jump in and do some cool stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I started with an Endor adventure. I don't know if you know that game, Legends of Endor.
Oh yeah, yeah, with, Michael Menzel.
Yeah, Michael Menzel, but yeah, that's only with some cards. But I found that already quite difficult, and so if I have to imagine that if you are playtesting a role play adventure, that would be quite hard to make, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do a lot of planning,
Yeah.
like just like jumping in and just writing stuff. It
Yeah, you
doesn't.
also have to do it. You have to start. That's the most difficult part.
Yeah,
I
that's true with any venture. Like
yeah.
getting it out of your head into onto something that you can start playing with is always the hardest part.
Yeah. Hey, and one of the last things I want to talk about is that one of the feedback points was that people find role play adventure a little bit too easy.
Yeah.
Um, and now I think you explained yourself quite well. I think it was on BGG something was posted about it.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah,
can you
we
tell me something about that? And that are there changes about the difficulty level in the newest expansion, or can you tell me something about that?
yeah. So Roleplayer Adventures came out. We had done. We play tested this thing for 3 years, and when we put it all together and we had a bunch of playtesting done, and it wasn't really identified as being too easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of it just comes from the idea for that in our minds, like narrative first, like the game is all about the story. But like not everybody thinks that way. Some people they want a difficult challenge in a solo mode. And we shot at a certain level, and it seemed that people wanted something harder, and that's fine. So we took that, and we really looked at all the mechanics of the game from the beginning of the campaign to the end. We were running through like we created like basically like a cheat, not a cheat, like a quick play guide where like you don't read any story. It's just mechanics to like get through it as fast as we can to really see where the difficulty was. And it took some time to do that kind of work. And gamers wanted like a solution, yesterday.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, as they do. And we did a lot of testing that way. And we're trying to come up with some changes we could make that would, they're not like fix this little thing here, fix this little thing here, but like kind of take all the concerns that people had and like come up with a small set of changes that would solve multiple things. And so we did. We made a revised version of the rules that changes how resting works, and there's a penalty there that like pulls cards out of the party's deck. And then we have which that mode is kind of for people that want to experience a cool story. And yeah, there's going to be a couple failures along the way, but it's not particularly challenging in terms of like really doing lots of mental exercises to get the red 3 over to a black 1 or whatever. So, and then we have a legendary mode that we really kind of bumped up the difficulty on. That one. It restricted the number of times people wanted to rest, which was one of the problems that people were running into. They were just resting all the time, which made they didn't have a whole lot of incentive to do larger rests, which cost more XP, which pulls more money or more currency out of the system to do upgrades. So it kind of has this cascading effect. And then we built the system that restricted how many cards the party could have. So they had to make some more difficult choices about like which cards do we want to hold on to, which ones can we get rid of, and then we're going to sell those. Like where do we can save our money to spend in the market to increase how many cards the party can have. So we did a bunch of tweaks like that. I think they're all great changes. And then those were released as like a 2.0 rule set online that people could pick up, could download and play with. And we released like a new party journal and stuff like that. And then all those changes are going to slide into Gulpax's secret. So all those kind of role player 2.0 rules are in the Gulpax's rulebook. There's a reminder of like, these are all the new rules. Yeah. If you missed the update or you're not even aware of the update, this is how resting works. This is how legendaries has changed. And we're testing with those changes with the new campaign. So, I mean, in hindsight, I wish we didn't have to do rules 2.0. But clearly there was an issue that people found, and we wanted to address it, so we did.
Oh no, that's you listen to the people, and then you try. Yeah, you can't make everybody happy, so that's also true. But I think the changes you made, especially the new resting, that you can't rest all the time on the maps. I think that's a change for good.
Right. I think the resting rules are the new ones are good. So honestly, in the base game, there's a rest token that you flip basically to stop you from just resting over and over again. We put that token in there, and that was a pretty late addition. It was, and like my spidey sense was, I ignored it a little bit. Like, that was a late addition. But previously, you could kind of rest whenever you wanted, and there was no penalty to it. So we kind of restricted that by putting that token in. And it turns out that token is just kind of annoying because you always forget to flip it over. Mm-hmm. And so I think the problem that we had was that people were resting too often, and they were always just resting for 1 XP. And so we found this solution, and we went with it. And then over time, we found this other solution, which we just say, okay, after 3 rests, you're going to have to start paying this other penalty. Now you don't have to flip a token whenever you have a dice encounter. It's 1 less component, so manufacturing is a little bit more affordable. It gives the players a lot more freedom. Like, if they want to rest twice in a row, that's cool, go for it. But, if you do it more than 3 times, you're going to have to start putting cards back. So it encourages players to kind of wait till they really need to rest, and then they do bigger rests, which I think is more fun. And so in those situations, like, everybody's rolling different numbers of dice for healing. So people are like different hit point levels, which is more interesting than like everybody's kind of always at their maximum, which is not that interesting. Yeah. And then you've got the character that's got the healing card, and you're like, yeah, my buddy is low because he rolled really poorly on the last rest. I'm going to use this card. I'm going to heal him. And that's a much kind of cooler experience, I think, than just kind of having cards for healing that because you rest all the time, they don't do anything.
You're maxed out all the time.
Yeah. So it was definitely, it was kind of hard to kind of deal with, like just like mentally after working on something for a long time and being really proud of it, and then kind of getting a lot of kind of negative feedback about this element of it that, you know, we should have, I mean, I can't change the past, but, if we'd play tested it one more time, would we have identified it and like put the brakes on the production?
I think you can't how do you say that, predict the future, so
right. I mean, and I guess it's just, I think it's I have a lot of passion for the work that I do, and I want to be very proud of the work. And obviously, people have been enjoying Role Player Adventures immensely.
I think it's it was during one of the lockdowns. I've played it. I think within 2 weeks I played the whole game, and
that's a lot of reading.
Yeah, it's a lot of reading, but I was on my room and on my own.
Yeah.
So then it's a little bit faster, but I think it hits the sweet spot for me, because then sometimes if you want to play solo, then you don't want to overthink everything, and this was the perfect, because if you fail, the story goes on, so there are no penalties about failing. So I think I died at least a couple of times, because
Right.
I made really bad decisions. But that was fine, and I think that the story and the writing was really good. That was also one of the things that people were saying, and I agree with that. And it was a lot of fun, and even in the end, that it was the things you throwing at us, the players. That was there were some nice twists and turns during some maps.
Right. Yeah.
So
I mean,
I'm really looking forward to what you have in this expansion.
Yeah, we've got some. So there's definitely some twists in store for you on this one.
Cool.
So I don't want to give anything away, but it's interesting. I still really enjoy playing Role Player Adventures, like, because the base game has like over 440,000 words in it.
Yeah.
Like, I forget some of the results of some of these choices sometimes, because it's been a while since I've read them or whatever, and like we sit down to play, and like I'm just like entertained by my by my own game. So yeah, it's, if you love a great story, I think Role Player Adventures is a fantastic experience for people.
Yeah, and when I was playing the first time, I also intentionally didn't go to every location on the map, so I can visit the second time and still have some surprises left.
Right.
So
there's
really
the item use piece where you're probably not going to go to every place and try to use all the items at all locations. Yeah. There's lots of choices that you can make if you only have like favor with one faction versus another. So I think like definitely you can have a really good like second play. I think by the time you get to like the third and the fourth play through the campaign, you're probably seeing some stuff that you've seen before, and it's not as there's less discovery involved, but it's still fun.
Yeah, but I can play it. I can play with my. I hope. Yeah, I can put it away and play with my 4-year-olds in 10 years time. So then I forgot everything. So it's a whole new experience.
I mean, that was one of the surprises when Role Player Adventures came out for me, was that people were reporting that they were playing it with their kids all the time.
Yeah.
And like we intentionally didn't go really gory and like avoided like highly sexual stuff, like adult content. We tried to keep that like in kind of a tasteful place. But I think it's cool. I mean, I have my 11-year-old and he enjoys playing it, and the guy, the person I mentioned was working on their own trilogy of games. Yeah. Like, he's like 15 years old, and he's like dug into he's read every single passage, and he really dug into the DNA of how Role Player Adventures work, and it's cool. I mean, it's definitely a game that families can enjoy, but it's not really a family game, but definitely families can enjoy it. I don't like. It doesn't have the lightness of like a Ticket to Ride or a Carcassonne or something like that, but it's still fun. And
it's a game for I try to play role playing games, but they are not for me, I think, because I always ended after 2 or 3 playing sessions. I ended a little bit frustrated because you can't imagine, or you can't remember all the rules, or because you try to do everything right. And this is a perfect solution for me because the choices are already made and you only have to only have to pick one.
Right. Early versions of role player adventures had like actual role playing in it, where you like went to a location and the storybook would say, describe to the other players what the forest looks like, and to try to do some kind of hybrid between kind of choose your own adventure, like static, like on the rails versus like wide open RPG, and like have pockets of wide open RPGs along the way, and the players hated it. Like they wanted to be on the rails. They want to be like it's like it's like watching a movie and saying go wherever you want. It's like we want a specific. You can tell the best story when you know what's going on, what the players are going to do. And role playing is great, but I feel like that belongs over here, and role player adventures is over here in the board game space that's more directed. So yeah.
I think I have everything I wanted to know about role player and role player adventures and the new expansion. Do you have anything? Do you have some last words to say?
Hope to see you on the Kickstarter. Thanks for the continued support on all the Thunderworks products, and keep an eye. We always got new and cool stuff coming, so keep an eye out in the future. Cool.
Thanks for the interview.
Happy to be here.
And, maybe we talk and see each other different day, different times.
That'd be cool.
I always have to. There's one thing that I have to go to Gen Con once in my life, so that's on my bucket list.
I assume you've been to Spiel before.
Yeah. I live 1.5 hour ride to Spiel, so I go there every year.
I've only been to Spiel once. It was 2019, and I want to go again.
That's the year before COVID, I think.
Yeah. Before the dark time.
The dark ages.
Yeah, and I like Spiel has a different feel than Gen Con, 100%.
Okay.
Like Spiel feels like you're going to a massive store. It's all about people going and spending money.
And it's all about German board games. That's really that's a
right
pain in the neck.
But Gen Con is like that's a part of it, but a lot of Gen Con is just people playing games and getting together and like going, meeting in hotel rooms or hotel lobbies and playing games and going out drinking together and going to social events. And a lot of the floor space of Gen Con, probably half of it, maybe more, is just dedicated to events of people signing up to play games. That are not run by the publishers. They're just like people who like, I want to play, War of the Ring, and I'm gonna set up a game at Gen Con so I get to play some random person. And so there's just lots of kind of just more game playing and less game buying than there, which is what surprised me at Essen. Like Essen, you go to the booth, you get the demo, you buy the game, you move it to the next booth, do the demo, buy the game, go to the next booth.
And at the end of the convention, you post a picture of how big your
hall
games is.
And then people just go home. Whereas in there's Gen Con, there's events going till like 2 a.m. all the time, and people stay up late playing games like crazy. So it's definitely not as big as Spiel. Spiel is massive. It's like, but I think there's something that I like about Gen Con a little bit better, but maybe it's because I'm American. I don't know.
I've never been to Gen Con, so I can't make.
You'll have to come and then tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, I will do that.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, it's 11:15 your time.
11:15.
And you're a teacher. You got to go teach in the morning. So
yeah, I have a vacation. So it's spring. No, it's not spring, but it's autumn vacation. So I can
sleep in tomorrow.
Sleep. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for have the invite.
Yeah.
And I will definitely back the expansion for sure, and the first expansion as well. So because it was really hard to get in Europe.
Yeah, I think I have 12 copies of it left.
That's
so.
You can better have 12 copies left than 1,200. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you have any questions, feedback, or just want to reach out, you can send an email to info@boardgamebrothers.nl. And we always say in Dutch, spelen verbroedert.